Hello, everyone. Today, we are going back to the year 1914. It was the first winter of World War I. Millions of young men were away from their families. They lived in deep, dirty holes in the ground. We call these trenches. The British soldiers and the German soldiers were enemies. They were very close to each other. Sometimes the enemy was only 30 meters away. You could hear them coughing. You could smell their cooking, but the conditions were terrible. It rained every day. The trenches were full of freezing water, mud, and giant rats. A young British soldier wrote a letter to his mother. "Mom, my boots are full of ice. I haven't slept in 3 days. I just want to go home." Between the British and the Germans, there was an empty, destroyed field. It was called No Man's Land. If anyone walked into No Man's Land, they were shot immediately. It was a place of death. But then December 24th arrived, Christmas Eve. The rain finally stopped. The temperature dropped, and the mud froze solid. A beautiful white frost covered the battlefield. The British soldiers were resting in the dark. Suddenly, a soldier pointed his finger and whispered, "Look, what is that?" On top of the German trenches, small lights began to appear. 1, 2, 10, 50 lights. The Germans were putting small Christmas trees with candles on the edge of their trenches. The British soldiers held their guns tightly. Is it a trap? Are they attacking? But it was not an attack. A sound came through the cold winter air. It was a man's voice. He was singing a song. Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. It was the famous Christmas carol, Silent Night. The British soldiers couldn't believe their ears. They stopped breathing and just listened. When the German soldier finished, the British soldiers started to clap. Then a British soldier shouted, "Our turn!" The British soldiers started to sing the first Noel. The Germans clapped for them. Then both sides sang, "O Come All Ye Faithful" together. One side sang in English, the other in German. Enemies were making perfect harmony in the middle of a war. The next morning was Christmas Day. The sun was shining, but there was a thick fog. A British soldier looked over the trench. He saw a shocking sight. A German soldier was standing up. He didn't have a gun. He had his hands in the air. He walked slowly into No Man's Land. He shouted in broken English, "Merry Christmas, Englishmen. We not shoot, you not shoot." The British officer said, "It's a trick, get down." But a brave British soldier threw his gun on the ground. "I am going out," he said. He climbed out of the trench and walked toward the German. The two enemies met in the middle. They looked at each other. They were just young boys, tired and cold. They slowly reached out their hands and shook hands. "Merry Christmas, mate," the British boy said. Soon, hundreds of soldiers from both sides climbed out. They left their weapons behind. The battlefield was completely peaceful. In No Man's Land, an amazing party began. They couldn't speak each other's language very well, but they communicated with smiles and gestures. They started to exchange gifts. A British soldier gave a German some sweet plum pudding and tea. The German soldier gave him some German sausage and a nice cigar. They showed each other black and white photos of their mothers, wives, and babies. "She is beautiful," they told each other. There is a famous true story. One German soldier was a professional barber in London before the war started. He met his old British customer in the middle of the battlefield. The German laughed and said, "My friend, your hair is too long." He took out his scissors and cut the British soldier's hair right there in the freezing cold. People were laughing and taking photos together. Then somebody brought out a ball. Some history books say it was a real leather football. Others say it was a ball made of old clothes and string. It didn't matter. They used their coats and hats to make goalposts. And there, in the middle of World War I, a football match began. British soldiers against German soldiers. The ground was hard and full of holes. They were wearing heavy, uncomfortable military boots. But they ran like children. They chased the ball, slipped on the ice, and laughed loudly. There were no referees. There were no red cards. When someone fell down, an enemy helped him get up. According to the soldiers' letters, the Germans won the game 3-2. But nobody cared about the score. For a few hours, they forgot about the war. They were just young men playing a game they loved. The truce was not just for fun. It was also for respect. In no man's land, there were many dead bodies of their friends from the battles before. The British and Germans worked together. They dug graves in the frozen ground. They carefully buried the dead soldiers. A British priest and a German priest stood together. They read the 23rd Psalm from the Bible. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Enemies stood shoulder to shoulder, took off their hats, and cried for the fallen boys. It was the highest form of humanity. But miracles don't last forever. The sun began to set. The sky turned dark. The high-ranking generals and commanders heard about the party. They were furious. "This is treason. You must kill the enemy, not play football with them." The officers ordered the soldiers to return to their trenches. They warned, "If you don't shoot tomorrow, you will be executed." A German soldier shook hands with his new British friend one last time. "Thank you for today. Good luck to you," he said. "You too, my friend. Stay safe," the British soldier replied. They went back into the deep, dark holes. The next morning, the officers fired their pistols into the air. The war started again. The shooting returned. The war lasted for 4 more terrible years. Millions more died. The soldiers who played football that day probably had to shoot at each other later. But the story of the Christmas truce lived on. It is a story that proves a powerful truth. Even in the darkest, most terrible places, human beings are not born to hate each other. When we look into each other's eyes, we see a friend, a father, a son. For one beautiful day in 1914, a simple football and a song stopped a world war. Thank you for listening to this incredible true story. See you in the next episode.